All right, so welcome everyone to the Astronaut Health Science Education Resources class. I'm so excited to be with you all today. I'm also excited because this is the 2019 special edition of this course to prepare for the Summer of Space, which takes place this summer. And moving on. All right, so for introductions, if you would like, please go ahead and put what type of librarian you are in the chat box to see who all is here, or if you're any other profession. And your chat box should be on your lower right-hand corner of your screen. As far as for myself, I'm the Consumer Health Coordinator at the NNLM South Central Region, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. Thank you, someone from Public Services. All right. I have experience in the laboratory, also in the science classroom. I've worked in a public library, a health sciences library, and I've also worked in healthcare research, and now I work in outreach and grants. And I'm also, as of this year, really honored to be a NASA Solar System Ambassador Expert Volunteer, which I'll also talk about in a little bit. And my bachelor's degrees are in chemistry and religious studies, and I also have a Master of Science in Information Science and Health Informatics, and I was once a chemistry teacher, so I have a passion and love for anything to do with the sciences. All right, so it looks like we have some health sciences librarian and program specialist for public library. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to have you here today. So for objectives today, we will recognize some National Library of Medicine resources for health information. We will also identify some NASA resources for STEM education. We'll also locate some resources for health science careers for our younger patrons. And we'll also gain awareness of some wonderful communities of practice that are working on helping libraries bring STEM programming into their space. And also just take a step towards launching your own Summer of Space if that's something that you're interested in today. So I am just going to briefly cover who we are in case you're not familiar with us already. I'm sure some of you are, but for those who aren't, it starts off with the National Institutes of Health at the top. That is the nation's medical research agency, and it is comprised of 27 different institutes and centers, and one of them is the National Library of Medicine. And interestingly, the National Library of Medicine is the world's largest biomedical library, which I just find fascinating. And it gives people access to research and development and training in health information and technologies. But they're also the organization that coordinates the NNLM, which is us. And we help promote and provide access to health information in communities across the nation. And so the NNLM is made up of 8 different offices across the nation, and I'm coming to you from the South Central office, so our acronym is SCR, and we serve Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arkansas. But if you go to our website, nnlm.gov, you'll be able to find who serves your region. And our mission is to advance the progress of medicine and improve public health by providing all U.S. health professionals with equal access to biomedical information and improving the public's access to information. And I want to emphasize that part, to improve the public's access to information, also enabling them to make informed decisions. That's really why we're here as the NNLM. So that was a bit of an introduction to who we are, but this is why we're here today. It's the Year of Space for Libraries. I'm sure some of you are aware. And the reason why it's a Summer of Space is because there is a nonprofit organization called the Collaborative Summer Reading Program, or CSLP, and they create summer reading materials that are utilized by libraries across the nation, and they pick a different theme every year. And the theme for this year happens to be space, and it's because the Apollo moon landing was in 1969, which brings me to our next slide. So this is why we're celebrating space, and I actually saw that there was a channel that was having some specials this week to celebrate 50 years from 1969, and the first episode is on the Apollo moon landing. And also, I really am a believer in using thematic education, or using different themes that are interesting for all people, really, to be able to engage them in some of the subject matters that are really needing some some engagement in. And so science, technology, engineering, math. I'm sure most of you have heard about STEM. Sometimes people call it STREAM or STEAM with an R for reading and an A for art. And it really is just about getting people engaged in these subject matters so that we can continue on with our innovations. So NNLM, as part of this project, has created a summer reading booklet. It's called the Summer Health Programming Manual, and you can find it on our website. And Sarah has wonderfully put in a link to the handout. And the handout, if you're able to download it, has 3 pages, and it has every link to almost anything that I mentioned in this PowerPoint today. So don't worry about writing down links or anything like that. They'll all be in the handout that you can download. So we also have a Summer Reading Initiatives page where we have curated and put together all of our resources that have to do with space and health. And so you can see here we have just a sampling, a screenshot I took a little bit ago. One of the webinars that was available, and I'm sure it's on our YouTube page now as it happened in the past, there was a project that a public library system created along with NNLM funding, and essentially they had their patrons walk to the moon together. And what that means is that they had patrons taking steps and recording their steps, and then the total sum of their steps would equal the distance if you were to walk to the moon. And so that Boost Box session, Summer Library Programming and Library Moonwalk, was a 1-hour webinar where the public librarians talk about that program that they conducted. And so you can see the recording for that one. And of course, the one today you see at the bottom there, Astronaut Health. So there's some additional space related guides and webinars on that, and the URL is there. It's also in your handout. So those are some of the resources that NNLM has created the past year specifically for this Summer of Space. So coming into the space field year, I work in a group that happens to work with health information, and I was trying to think about the connections between space and health, and there's actually many connections. So there's many ways I could have gone about this. And I just thought about, there's medical technologies that are new, but there's also astronauts. People tend to connect with personal stories more than they do just data. And so I wanted to talk about some of the astronauts because they really do have some interesting stories. And mostly I'll talk about the twin study today. The reason why I picked them also is that they can help us learn about the human body in extreme environments. Their experiences really test human capacity. They must be physically fit to endure their time in space and re-entry. They consist of some of our best scientists, engineers, and pilots. And also they're able to create hope and excitement in space exploration and human progress. So kind of like role models for us. So I'm going to start off with some astronaut health topics, and there's a lovely picture of Sally Ride with astronaut Catherine Sullivan, and they're showing some sleep restraints that they used back then. They look a little different now. And we'll start off with anatomy, and we'll go on to heart health, bones, muscles, and so on. So I'll start off with the anatomy page on Medline Plus. It is our flagship website, and it is a consumer health resource from the National Library of Medicine. And it's created to be easy to read and to be able to be searched on any device. So if you're on your phone or if you're on a laptop or your computer, it should be able to fit to the screen. And it can also take you to more information. So you see here we have the summary page for anatomy, and then it has some links to further information depending on what you are looking for, and also depending on the audience you're looking for. So you can see there, it's a little bit small, but there's a side that said for you. And under that, you can see there's children, teenagers, men, and women. So there's different things that you can look up. Medline Plus contains 1,000 different health topic pages. And for each topic, you can delve into more. There's also available on Medline Plus videos. There's a medical encyclopedia. There's a page that helps you to know and learn how to read your lab results that you've gotten from a patient visit. So the really wonderful thing about Medline Plus is that all of the information is vetted. And all of the sources that have been linked out to from Medline Plus are also vetted, so you can be sure that your information is good information. And so I would just highly recommend that you check out Medline Plus if you haven't already. I have a colleague who refers to Medline Plus as their Google for health information, and I kind of like that. So how many of you knew that astronauts' bodies change in space? Is anyone aware of that? And feel free to interact in the chat box if you would like. as we are all muted. So an astronaut's height is temporarily changed in space. Without gravity pushing and pulling on their body, it kind of stretches out and becomes longer. Without resistance, the body doesn't need as much bone and muscle to hold the body up, and so the bone and muscle starts to break down because it's not as needed. So astronauts have to work out a minimum of 2 hours a day to prevent bone and muscle loss. But upon returning to Earth, most of that goes back to normal. Yes, awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. TV show. Oh, I haven't seen that TV show. I'll have to check that out. And so they have a funny word for it, puppy head, bird legs. And what they mean by that is that fluid and blood rushes up to the head because there's no gravity pulling it down. And so then your face gets a little swollen and your birds look a little skinnier. So you've got a puppy head and bird legs. I think it's a fun way to describe it for younger patrons. Oh, thank you. In the chat we see Brooks Air Force Base worked with Project Paperclip. Oh, yes, with space medicine researchers. Yes, Project Paperclip is a very interesting history. Thank you for sending that in. So some resource for talking about bone and muscle health is through NIAMSD, which is, and this is a bit long, but it's the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases. The reason why I bring them up is because they have a page for children specifically. It's their kids pages, and you can see their screenshot, and they have information, health information on healthy muscles, healthy joints, healthy skin, healthy bones, so along the same lines. Interestingly, the National Cancer Institute, which is another institute of the NIH, has a very detailed and structured module that walks you through the different body systems, and that's definitely at a much higher reading level, so more like college and beyond. And then, of course, Medline Plus also has health topics that includes bones, joints, and muscles. Another piece of anatomy for astronauts is eyes. And so we talked about the shifting fluids earlier, which is why astronauts get a little bit taller while they're in space. The fluid shift can also affect their eyes. So pictured here is astronaut Karen Nyberg, she was an Expedition 36 flight engineer, and she was conducting an ocular health exam on herself in this picture in the Destiny Laboratory that was on the International Space Station. Various crew members actually do this. They take their own eye measurements. And I bring this up because you can go to the National Eye Institute, and they have information all about the eye. And so, again, without gravity pulling body fluids down towards legs and feet, the fluids move towards the upper body, and this may cause the fluid to create increased pressure in the head that may possibly affect the veins around the eyes and around the brain. And so scientists are currently studying what they're calling SANS, which is Space Flight Associated Neuroocular Syndrome. And also, NEI has a page for kids, and so I like that page because they have an Ask a Scientist video series that is directly made for children. There's a glossary about eye health. There's first aid and health tips specifically for eyes, so like wearing goggles for sports events and things like that to prevent your eyes, because a lot of eye injuries actually happen during sports events. There's also printables, PDFs, activity books, a calendar and posters, so lots of kid-friendly materials that you would be able to print out from the NEI Kids website. And then shifting from younger patrons to perhaps college and beyond patrons, there's also Pubmed and Pubmed Central, and some of you may already be aware, but just in case you're not, Pubmed Central is an NCBI resource, an NNLM resource essentially, and it is a free full-text archive of biomedical and life sciences journal literature, and it provides about 4.9 million articles that have been archived. And as an archive, PMC is designed to provide access to you to all of its content. The articles are free, but do note that authors and publishers of those articles do still hold their copyright. But I bring this up because PubMed has a specific subset search strategy, if you're familiar with search strategies. And they have one for space life sciences. And that subset search strategy is available through PubMed, and it was created because there used to be an organization called NASA Spaceline. And that NASA Spaceline office had partnered with NLM, and it was intended to allow you to retrieve citations of interest in the fields of space life sciences research. And so that collaborative agreement ended, and that was essentially put into Pubmed as just a regular subset. So that's something you can also look for if you're interested in finding any articles or journals on any sort of astronaut health or space life sciences information. All right, our next health topic is fitness. Pictured here are some astronauts working out in space shuttles around the space station. And as we said before, they have to work out at least 2 hours a day to maintain their bone and muscle density. So there we see astronaut Edward T. Liu, astronaut Sunita Williams, and astronaut Robert Curbeam with different workout devices. So one thought I had was that libraries have so much room for activities. There's different programs that NASA has via their website that have ready-made activity plans that you could use. So some ideas would be to have a physical fitness or education event at the library, even outside possibly, have a field day. And so some of the example activities you can see here is building an astronaut core and the Agility Astro course. And to note, part of the requirements for becoming an astronaut is passing the astronaut physical, along with also a bachelor's degree in a STEM field and 3 or more years of related professional experience. So you could play off of that requirement for any students who are interested in this, in these type of STEM health careers in the future, that they must pass a physical. So that could be an activity as well. And just on the idea of taking it outside, StarNet, which I will talk about more in a second, has some activities that you can go to specifically for libraries. And so here we have Jump to Jupiter, which is an outside activity where participants jump through a course from the grapefruit-sized sun past a poppy seed-sized Earth and onto marble-sized Jupiter. And so you can see here that they have it really well laid out to where you can see what the content area is, what age groups it would fit. This is just one example of the activities they have. The time that it would take to complete the activity, how much time you need to prep the activity, and the cost averages for the activity that you would do. And so these activities are especially made for libraries to be able to conduct. And so I'll talk about StarNet in a little bit, but I wanted to bring that up because it had to do with an activity dealing with fitness at the library. There's also health and nutritional aspects of astronaut health. I would recommend trying out the Food in Space activity and the NNLM Summer Reading Manual, which I've mentioned before. And a quick question, does anyone in this webinar know why astronauts eat tortillas instead of bread? Is that something that we even knew, that they eat tortillas instead of bread on the space station? So yes, thank you, James. No crumbs. That's actually really fast. So floating crumbs from bread can damage equipment or be accidentally inhaled by the astronauts. Tortillas make far less crumbs, and they can be stored more easily than bread. They also take up less space than bread, so they're just much more convenient to store. So instead of PB&J sandwiches, they have tortilla PB&J tortilla sandwiches. So some other tips I have is I actually used to be a teacher, and teachers in education were all about lesson plans. But what I've found is that lesson plans can be turned into library activities by either scaling them up or scaling them down as necessary. And so that's something that I've looked through the NASA website, seeing a lot of lesson plans and seeing how some of them can actually be just scaled differently and turned into a library activity. So I promised to talk about the twin study. Real quick in the chat box, how many of you knew that they were astronaut twins? That there were astronaut twins? Let us know in the chat box if you knew. Awesome. Yeah, it's so fascinating, isn't it? They actually have different stories of how they came about to become astronauts, and one of them actually came out with a book recently that I read, and it's really fascinating to read. But so the twins are both now retired, but they were astronauts. They are also engineers, and they were also U.S. Navy captains. And the short story is that one twin stayed in space for a year while the other stayed on Earth between 2015 and 2016. And scientists have been studying everything that happened to them physiologically since then. And so Captain Scott Kelly, who is on the left, is the twin who went up to space for a year. And when I say up to space, I mean the International Space Station. And Captain Mark Kelly is the twin who stayed on Earth. And there's also a Russian cosmonaut who also went up for a year, but the twin study is obviously based on the two twins. So the twin study was led by the Human Research Program at NASA. So again, we have that astronaut health concept. And the study focused on 4 different categories of research that was split into 10 different investigations, which is what they call a study, with 10 separate investigators, which is essentially the scientists who were leading those studies. And they coordinated and shared all the data analysis as one large integrated research team, which is just really revelatory for a science project, essentially. And they evaluated the twin astronauts to be able to look into the subtle effects and changes that might occur in space flight as compared to Earth, just to do some preliminary health research on how humans would respond to, say, a trip to Mars, which would take about 18 months, and then another 18 months back. And so essentially they studied 2 individuals who have the same genetics but are in different environments for 1 year. So that idea of a control and a variable that we learn in science class. And so this is just a visual representation of those different studies. And the initial timeline indicated that the research papers should be released sometime between 2018 and 2019. But actually, they came out this year, and the research paper, the large collaborative one, companion paper at the end, actually came out 12 days ago. So it came out a little bit later, but I was really excited to see that. What is it, like 2 Thursdays ago? There was an article that came out in Science Magazine that was essentially the summary of this integrated research, and it came out on April 11th. And so in the handout, on the 3rd page, there's a section that is named Suggested Videos, and the first video is on the astronaut twins, and NASA created a really short 2-minute video that essentially summarizes this whole study. So if you're interested in checking that out, please do so on the handout later. So something fascinating happened to Captain Kelly while he was in space. And first, in order to understand what happened, I need to explain a little bit and give you a little refresher primer on DNA. DNA is that twisted long molecule that you see there on the screen that holds our genetic code. It's also referred to as deoxyribonucleic acid. And that DNA double helix that you can see in that image coils up tightly into bundles. And those bundles essentially go into that X-looking thing. That X-looking thing is the chromosome. So you can see there as it's tagged on there, chromosome. The chromosomes are located within the nucleus of almost every cell in our body, and humans have 23 pairs. And the telomeres are at the tips. So they are these like little end caps, you could say, found at the ends of the chromosomes. And they consist of that same short DNA sequence repeated over and over and over again. And as people age, their telomeres progressively get shorter. And in fact, this is kind of what causes aging in the first place. So it's really interesting to find that most of Captain Kelly's telomeres actually did the opposite when he was in space. His telomeres actually got longer while he was up there. So it's just fascinating as far as any sort of scientific research goes. And so, they've been investigating that. However, whenever he came back, they did return to being shortened again. And I got a little distracted by the chat box there. I wanted to check it out real quick. Let's see here. Yes, the handout will be, the link to the handout will be put up again, so you'll be able to have all of the links to the videos that I've been describing. All right, so back to the telomeres. Side note, for those of you who are familiar with fake news, there was some fake news that went around in the summer of 2018, and some journalists had seen an article that came out from this research, and they misinterpreted it or didn't quite understand it fully, and they were saying that Scott Kelly's genes had changed. If his genes had changed, he would be a mutant. He would be a completely different species. So that wasn't entirely correct. What happens is that sometimes, depending on your environment, if you're stressed, if you went mountain climbing, or if you went scuba diving, your genes might have a different gene expression level. And so what happened with Captain Kelly is that his gene expression changed. And so this is just an example that shows how important science literacy is today, especially when there's so many studies out and sometimes the results are taken out of context. by those who may not necessarily understand what those results are. And to add to the hilarity, Captain Scott Kelly is a pilot. He was a fighter pilot, not necessarily a scientist. He was a pilot astronaut. And so when he saw that article about his genes changing, he actually retweeted it and thought, oh, awesome, my genes changed. And so the NASA scientists had to come in and say, no, your gene expression changed. So I just thought that was interesting as far as fake news goes, even today with science information. So Urine in space has effects on DNA and chromosomes, and so to bring that down to a level that younger patrons or even regular, well, any age patrons, you can learn more about DNA by using our NNLM Summer Reading Manual. We have a citizen science activity called Incredible Edible DNA. And essentially, you can learn what DNA is and what base pairs are by just using some toothpicks and candy, and you can create some tasty double helixes. And you can talk about DNA and how it is a long molecule that contains our unique genetic code. Which brings me to Genetics Home Reference. So Genetics Home Reference is a National Library of Medicine resource, and it has basically just consumer-friendly information about the effects of genetic variations on human health. So you might think, how would I use this? So I was thinking about, there are a lot of DNA tests, DNA testing kits that have become really popular. Like right around Thanksgiving, I see a lot of ads for them. They've become really popular, and I'm sure you might have some patrons who have done those. They even have DNA testing kits for dogs now, and I have to admit, I actually did it for my dog. Turns out he is 100% miniature Australian Shepherd. And for human testing, though, if patrons have questions about their results, you can direct them here as a resource. So this Genetics Home Reference actually has some information specifically to help with those kinds of results that people might have questions about. But there's also some more basic information. There's a handbook called Help Me Understand Genetics, and it has questions and answers with illustrations, answering questions like, what is DNA? What is a gene mutation? How do mutations occur? So like we were talking about earlier with Scott Kelly, how many chromosomes do people have? That's a good question. And so this is just a good handbook that could be a great resource for students who are doing a project or a paper on DNA or genes or genetics or inheritance or anything that you'd be learning probably around 9th grade or around that. So it's just a really good resource. Also, just for personal reasons, if anyone has received a diagnosis for some sort of genetic condition, they can go here and learn more about more information about that condition as well. So it's just a good resource to go to for that kind of health information. And yes, someone has heard about the dog testing. We kept getting asked if our dog was part anything else, and so we finally just wanted to know. So I'm sure that other people have similar reasons. Quick question, does anyone know how many pairs of chromosomes we have? How many chromosomes? Yes, thank you, James. You were on top of it today. So we have 23 pairs and 46 chromosomes overall. And so quickly, another resource I think is definitely much more public library friendly. The National Library of Medicine has traveling library exhibits, and they're made available to libraries across the country. Only a shipping fee is charged. And a traveling exhibition will come with banners, usually about 6 banners, and the banners contain information about a particular topic. And the information is also kept online so that you can still access the information even if you don't have the physical banner. But one of these that I thought was really fun is Harry Potter's World, Renaissance Science, Magic, and Medicine. And so surprisingly, this resource is about genetics, but just follow me here. They use the world of Harry Potter and the creatures and characters of it to teach genetic concepts. So we have different animals that are able to bring out some of those concepts. So Harry Potter, the books turned 20 in 2017 or 2018, depending on whether you're going from the English or American versions. But essentially, it's still pretty popular. So if you want to integrate some pop culture into your library, have a science or English event, the website actually has lesson plans for English and science classes for middle and high school. And again, as I was saying before, don't be afraid to look at lesson plans and think about how you might be able to adapt them and scale them up or down to fit a library activity. And we actually had a library partner in our region who booked this exhibition. and they really had a lot of fun with it. They bought cardboard cutouts of the Harry Potter characters and placed them around the banners. So they had Hermione and Harry and Dumbledore, and they had them placed around the banners. And they also conducted library programming using the Harry Potter theme. So they had, if anyone's familiar with having therapy dogs at the library, they had a Patronus event where they had therapy dogs, and so they just really did a lot of cute programming ideas. There's another one where they had fake news, and they used the example of the journal the magazine in the Harry Potter world and how it published fake information about Harry. And so they really went deep with it, and I really appreciated that. But again, this is a traveling physical exhibit, but it also has the resources available online, so you can still get to that information. And then I wanted to just highlight two other exhibits. So there's actually several different, very niche exhibitions that NLM has, these physical ones. And so these exhibitions that I wanted to highlight, there's one that's called, a new one, it just came out actually, and it's called Rise, Serve, Lead, America's Women Physicians. And this exhibition focuses on how women physicians have made a difference to their medical practice and research, how they have worked as activists, how they have served as administrators and mentors to the next generation of physicians. So that one's brand new. Also, does anyone recognize one of the doctors on the screen? Does anyone recognize the doctor in the orange suit on the left? Let me know if you recognize who she is and put her in the chat box. The other exhibition on the right is Physician Assistance, Collaboration, and Care, which focuses on how the profession developed to meet social needs. And has stories from PAs all over the world. Oh, thank you, Heather. Heather got it right. It's May. Yes, May is awesome. So May is featured prominently on the front of that. I loved that. That was not my doing. It just happened. So May is on the left there in the orange. The back to physician's assistants, there is information on different practices that PAs work in and includes lesson plans for middle school and high school. The high school version has students research and look at employment outlook and certification requirements. So they can see if that's something that they would like to pursue. And again, I appreciate these resources because when I was younger, my parents essentially said, become a doctor or a lawyer, because that's all they really knew existed as far as, that type of work. And so I wished at the time that I had known about these other jobs that aren't as more prominently known in common culture. So some of these highlight some of these other jobs, like the physician's assistants, collaboration, and care, to show people that there are other careers that they can pursue in these health and science fields. They just, might need to know about them. So back to library support. Thinking about ways to get space into the library, there's a program called Storytime from Space, and it's supported by a nonprofit education foundation, and it's really sweet. They have videos of astronauts on the space station reading a STEM-themed children's book, and the videos will run anywhere between 8 to 20 minutes, depending on the length of the book. And this screen capture I took is of astronaut Joe Akaba, who actually was a teacher and educator before he became an astronaut, and he's reading notable notebook scientists and their writings in this story time. There's also one of my favorite Storytime from Space videos is of astronaut Dr. Kate Rubins reading Rosie Revere, Engineer. Is anyone familiar with that book, Rosie Revere, Engineer? It's such a great book, but just seeing her floating in space reading that out, I'm pretty sure I cried a little bit, I'm not going to lie. So that's a really great program, and there's links to this program on the handout. And also that link, Storytime from Space, is under the suggested videos, page 3 on the handout. So STREAM, I talked about how there's different variations of STEM. There's STEM, there's STEAM, there's STREAM. STREAM is where R is for reading. And I was thinking about that it can be fun to have books about astronauts on display in the library during the Summer of Space, but also there's books that have been written by astronauts, which I think is even funner because now you've got first-person perspective of people who have actually been in space and writing about their experiences, and which is really great. What is really great is that they have books for all ages. So I looked through some of their books, and Scott Kelly has a children's book called My Journey to the Stars, as well as his adult book. Leland Melvin has Chasing Space, but he also has a separate Young Readers edition. Several of the adult books have Young Readers editions. There's To the Stars, the first American woman to walk in space. So you have your Women in Space as well. You have To Space and Back by Sally Ride. So just really neat. And you could, have a space-themed book display or space-themed reading clubs and story times for different ages. And also, this is not an exhaustive list of the books that have been written by astronauts. I just picked a few. There's definitely more. And if you just look up books about astronauts, there will be several more as well. And, looks like we have some questions in the chat box. I'll check quickly. Oh, my goodness. So someone says that Mae Jemison was the keynote speaker for MLA 2015. I am so sad I missed that now. That's awesome. There's some people who love the Rosie Revere Engineer book. It's really great. And then, someone mentioned osteoporosis, bone density, bone loss, and prolonged absence of gravity. Interesting you bring that up. They actually had to figure out how to keep people, they have to figure out how to keep astronauts' bones strong in space, and so they had to give them supplements of vitamin D and see if that helps. And that, them doing that on the space station actually created some new recommendations for the dosage amounts of vitamin D that doctors on Earth now recommend to their patients. So there is a direct pipeline from space to Earth as far as that kind of research goes. So thank you for asking about that. All right, so now we're going to transition to the portion of the class where we talk about communities of practice that are absolutely ready to get libraries started with their own space and or STEM programming. These are some really great groups that we're going to talk about here. So the first one is the Museum Alliance. It's the NASA Museum Alliance, and they were created as a starting point for all informal educators who are seeking free NASA educational resources and services. And you can join the Alliance as members for free, which is also kind of like NNLM. We also have a network membership that you can join for free as well as an organization. But anyway, so I met with and I talked to representatives at the NASA Johnson Space Center, and they let me know that NASA is reaching out more to libraries. And that libraries and learning centers have also joined the Museum Alliance, so don't let the name discourage you. It just started out as a museum thing, but now they've definitely opened up, and you can see there I circled where they listed libraries as part of the community. And so it is a NASA-centric STEAM community of practice. They basically designed their activities to save time for you and your staff, and they want to help you just be able to navigate and find or create exactly what you need to teach your patrons about STEAM topics. They can answer any STEAM education questions you have, and they also host hundreds of different live teleconferences and resources, and they use the term teleconference. It's essentially the same as a webinar, I think. And they have all of them recorded and archived, and they're on a variety of topics, and they're geared especially towards informal education. So not your K through 12 teachers per se, but your libraries, your museums, your science centers, that sort of group. So that's right where we fit. And then StarNet is another really great community. StarNet stands for Science Technology Activities and Resources for Libraries. And as you can see there, I have a screenshot of their homepage. They have also joined the Universe of Stories, which is the theme for the Summer of Space. So Summer of Space is kind of the overall topic, but the actual little tagline is a Universe of Stories. And so according to their page, they have 125,000 people who have participated in programs that host libraries. They have over 7,500 librarians and STEM professionals who are members of this community. And this community includes a resource clearinghouse, blogs, a monthly newsletter, and special events and funding opportunities. And I thought this group was interesting in particular because of the resources that they have, the clearinghouse, the STEM and libraries resources, the webinars, but also that it's funded by so many different big-time funders. So I just thought that was interesting. They have funding from the NIH through a Science Education Partnership Award. They've had funding from NASA. They have funding from IMLS, which I'm sure you all know is the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And they have many partners, and their core partners include the American Library Association, the Association of Rural and Small Libraries, ARSL, and also the Chief Officers of State Library Agencies. So they have all of the library communities on board as either funders or partners. So they definitely have a lot of input into their libraries have a lot of input into what goes on with StarNet. And so I just wanted to highlight their STEM Activity Clearinghouse. And so part of their resources is they have large hands-on library exhibits, physical ones, which are on national tours, and the exhibits include Discover Space, Discover Earth, and Discover Tech. And there's also a small exhibits program that they have, which includes Explore Earth, Explore Tech, and Explore Space. It includes 6 double-sided graphic panels, a computer kiosk, and activities for a Discover station. And there are resources available to implement hands-on activities for different age groups in a library setting. So that's what's so wonderful about these groups, is that they're not just about education, but they're really about how to get this type of programming into the library, to where it works in the library. And they also provide online and in-person training for library staff, which introduces library staff to STEM content, to the exhibits, and guides library staff in developing complementary programming, so they can help you with that. There's also a comprehensive outreach program that they also do that's led by the After School Alliance. And according to their page so far, they've had 1.5 million people have visited the Stern and Discover exhibit. And then up next is the NASA Science Share the Science page. And we love our toolkits here at SCR, so any toolkit I appreciate. So this one is great. The toolkits have space-themed posters, graphics, and bookmarks, which is really great. And they have there, you can see on the bottom left, the Apollo Anniversary Collection is available. And I think that's of interest because that's what most of us will be celebrating this summer. It's the reason for the Summer of Space. And so one thing they told me when I met with the NASA Education Department is that the NASA website can kind of be like a giant rabbit hole. There's so many resources available on separate pages, so they are trying to create these specific groups and pages to help librarians and informal educators and educators be able to curate all of these resources, to be able to find them more easily. And also to note, the NASA Education Department is actually now called the NASA Office of STEM Engagement. So I thought that was also interesting. So one other group is the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory at Caltech, is a facility that coordinates the Solar System Ambassadors Program that I am a part of, that I've mentioned. It is also referred to as just JPL. And the JPL website has an education page with hands-on activities as well, and you can see an example of the homepage. I took a screenshot here. And this one in particular will also be of interest because it has to do with the moon and moon phases. So you can see here that they've updated it for 2019, knowing that the summer space is happening, and they've got related tags on the side. So you can kind of search it kind of like a database to see what educational activities they have as well. And then lastly, we have NASA at My Library Partners, where they selected 70 U.S. public libraries, and it was through an application process. And partners essentially obtained materials to train and assist them in leading STEM programming. They've also received STEM facilitation kits, tablet computers that were already preloaded with information. They also got a small stipend to attend an orientation, and they received a small grant to give them access to further STEM resources. And then there's also ARISS. In my head, I read that as RS. I'm not sure if that's correct. They are the amateur radio on the International Space Station, and students can speak directly with the International Space Station crew during scheduled contacts, which is just absolutely just mind-blowing to me, because essentially that means that, once this event is set up, a student or a teacher can just directly speak to someone on the space station. And I've actually been a part of one of these events. At a conference, they had, they call them a downlink, where they had Joe Akaba actually speak to us in real time. And there's just a slight delay, but it's really not a big deal when you realize that he's talking to you from the International Space Station. So it was really great. We had teachers who had already prepared their questions, and they were on the news, and the news had the teacher ask the question, and then they would cut back and forth from the astronaut's answer. So schools or libraries can apply to host a scheduled contact through RS. So that's just another an interesting group. And then lastly, for these groups, NASA also has a partnerships and collaborations program. Essentially, there's no exchange of funds for this one, but if anyone has any ideas in which they can achieve mutually beneficial objectives, they are open to those ideas through that website. And that website is linked to you on your handout. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the NASA Solar System Ambassador Program, and I'm so honored to be a part of it now. It is a nationwide public engagement effort carried out by expert volunteers, and we are selected once a year by NASA JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and it's a pretty rigorous process, but once you're selected, we carry out events and programming on behalf of JPL, and in return, we gain access to scientific briefings on NASA missions, and also just a general happiness to know that we get to share science with others. And honestly, for those of us who become ambassadors, that really is all we want or need, is to just be able to share science with others. And so this appointment has really helped open some doors for me. I received some solicitations from libraries to come and speak, so I've just been really happy to be a part of this program and be able to further that mission as well. And the mission of the Solar System Ambassadors is to work with expert volunteers across the nation to share the latest science and discoveries of NASA's space exploration missions through a variety of inspirational events. So, and that's our little logo. That's the logo specifically for the Solar System Ambassadors, is on the top left. And I just thought it looked really, really neat. And so just a quick history of the program. The program began in 1996 and has grown and changed names, and it's now spread across the nation. You can see there that it's in all 50 states, from DC to Puerto Rico to Guam, including like a few citizens abroad even. And since this program started, the ambassadors have run about 40,000 events and have served 9 million people directly, and that was as of the beginning of this year, so I'm sure it's grown even since then. So it's just been really wonderful to be part of such a large network of people who are just so passionate about just, you know, giving people access to scientific information. And this is just a visual representation of all of the current NASA missions that are happening. And so in the little spare time I have, I try to catch up on what all of these are. And so it's just really fascinating to see this visual image, because it all of a sudden shows how many different science programs are going on, how many different probes and machines are out there, and robots. So it's essentially a science fleet. We have, as humans, a science fleet in our solar system, and I think that is absolutely amazing. Yes, that is impressive. Thank you, Jennifer. And so the reason why I bring up this group is because we have events that are free for the public. Ambassadors can be a part of an event, or they can hold their own event. And so you can log into the page to see what's happening in your area. And the ambassadors are prepared. I actually attended a webinar that was intended for librarians to introduce them to the Solar System Ambassadors, and then I turned around and attended another webinar that was for the ambassadors to tell them why libraries were suddenly interested in soliciting them this year, and also to explain why there's so many requests right now. So I just thought that was funny, because I'm on both sides of the circle, from the library side and also the Solar System Ambassador side. And so I'm really excited about this, because I think it can expand outreach and using different subject matters. And so you can find your local ambassadors by visiting solarsystem.nasa.gov/SSA, and you can search the directory, or you can search the calendar, and you can do it geographically or by name. And so you can message ambassadors via their bio pages. So each ambassador has a bio page, and you can look them up by location. And the only thing I would say is please do keep in mind that all SSAs are volunteers and do not get paid to do this by NASA. We are selected expert volunteers, and so some volunteers may already be booked out for July or are already at capacity for requests, but they might still refer you to another ambassador or a resource. And so I've had some libraries that have just kind of blast contacted all of the ambassadors in their area to see who's available to help. And so I've answered the call for those for some of those that have sent those requests out. So that's why I bring it up, is because you can search and request them to come, perhaps either speak at your library or do an event at your library. They'll already know kind of what they have in their arsenal to be able to help you out. And so a group of us are going to go to a library in July on the Moon Anniversary Day to do some programming for a local library, so that's exciting. So as you all go off and look into these resources to create your own wonderful and unique to your library programming, I just wanted to throw out a couple last ideas to jumpstart your brainstorming session if you haven't already. There's art-based crafts with a space spin. There's a link to a video in your handout on page 3. It's called Space Quilts. And I won't be able to show it on WebEx. It's a little difficult to show videos on here. But essentially, the video is on a project that shows how human spaceflight has inspired humans to create art in many forms. And this video is about a collection of art quilts entitled Fly Me to the Moon. And it has been touring the country since late 2016. And a group of those quilts was actually displayed at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston in recognition of the 50th anniversary and also of the Apollo 1 fire. And the curator is Suzanne Jones, and there's a little snippet of her commenting on the artistic elements of some of the pieces as well as the educational value of the exhibit. And so I just thought it was so interesting that there were space quilts. Like, I love how the combination of art and science can come together. There's also, you can do hands-on investigation. So the NNLM Summer Reading Manual has activities that are more hands-on. You can do makerspace projects that have a STEM, twist or space twist, or even health science twist. You can do STEM-themed story times. We talked about the astronaut books. You can also do guest speakers like the solar system ambassadors or guides on the sides where we have, some ambassadors might have touch cards or exhibit tables with items that people can, touch and see. There's also science days. Mole Day is on October 23rd, and it's because Avogadro's number is 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. So that is on October 23rd. There's also Pi Day, which celebrates mathematics. And as the first digits of pi are 3.14, it's celebrated on 3/14. So those are just some fun ideas. And then I'm also a huge proponent of just trying to collaborate across professions and organizations. I think it's really interesting when you can partner up with another organization that might have a different perspective. I partnered up with a science teacher and an English teacher, and we held a STEM and literacy workshop with Health Connections at a conference that was held at the NASA Johnson Space Center. So that's me in the red jacket there with my NASA shirt beaming, so exciting. And so we got to hold this workshop, and it was really well received. We had lesson plans that were attached to the national standards for teaching, thanks to the teachers, and so it was just a really great experience to be able to just combine our forces, combine our resources, to be able to create a workshop that was really beneficial to some educators for this national conference. And I also just wanted to highlight briefly some examples of past funded projects from IMLS. So IMLS, of course, is the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and I noticed that they had leadership grants for learning spaces in libraries. And one example is Maine State Public Library had a project called Empowering Public Libraries to Become Science Resource Centers for Their Communities. And so their goal was essentially to in this initiative was to create field-tested and replicable science literacy methods that they could use to help their public libraries become skilled STEM facilitators. And so the project wanted to empower public libraries to build their science literacy capacity so that they can connect their communities to engaging and meaningful informal science and technology experiences, and also equipment, books, and media. So I thought that was really interesting. And then one of the key results was to have a guide that a state library agency could use to nurture STEM in public libraries. And then also, we had Kitsap Regional Library received a 3-year National Leadership Grant to implement a sustainable STEM programming model for public libraries. And their project was called Make, Do, Share. And it collected tools and resources to support library staff in planning, facilitating, and improving STEM programs for and with youth. And there's also Make It at Your Library, which is the website that helps librarians realize makerspace projects in their communities. And that also had some funding from IMLS, which is why I added it on here. So I just thought it was really fascinating that IMLS is also there's been federal support for bringing science community into the library. So this is just a snapshot of the government resources used in this presentation. We had the National Library of Medicine, we had Medlines Plus, Genetics Home Reference, the actual National Library physical exhibits, the Summer Reading Manual. We also had some National Institutes of Health resources where they had kid pages, and then also the the NASA resources, which includes the Solar System Ambassadors Program, which is really great, and then also an honorable mention to IMLS. And you can follow NASA. They are on so many different media platforms. You can see there, I have followed NASA, and it's really fun to see them in their daily content. You can follow them on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr, Pinterest, Google+, LinkedIn, and some other ones that I don't even recognize. And so they definitely have a lot going on there. They also have NASA en Español on Twitter, which I thought was also pretty neat. And you can also follow the National Library of Medicine. And so you can follow us in different ways. This is a screenshot of the homepage. There's the director's blog where she talks about, different things that are happening in the medical library world, announcements. There's technical bulletins to let you know what's going on with the resources, NLM announcements. That page links you to just a roundup of recent news or events or videos or press releases. There's also some RSS feeds, podcasts, and webcasts, so there's kind of a little bit of everything depending on what your flavor is for getting communication. And then someone I saw in the chat box mentioned that April 25th is National DNA Day, so thank you for that. I did see that. I just wanted to wait until I got to the slides to bring it up. So this is a screenshot of the NIH homepage this month, and so there you see the banner for National DNA Day, and it's actually the Thursday. It is a unique day when students, teachers, and the public can learn more about genetics and genomics. So perfect day to bring up genetics home reference and those other resources. And it's to commemorate the completion of the Human Genome Project. And then another banner here is for Pathways. It's a collection of free resources from Scholastic, which is a well-known K-12 organization, and this resource teaches students about basic science and research careers, and it's designed for grades 6 through 12 and provides educators with lessons as well and teaching guides. And according to NIH, the Pathways book was distributed to teachers as a special insert in the March issue of Scholastic Science World magazine. But you can download it, and you can download the materials on the Pathways website. And so I just thought that was nice because you can also access it for free online, even though it wasn't mailed to you necessarily. So wrapping up, the NLM is here to provide free training on NLM and NIH resources and other services that are useful to librarians. And we have grants and funding opportunities as well. We have a professional development grant that awards librarians and allows them to attend trainings or conferences that are health information related. For example, we could pay up to $2,000 to send a public librarian to, say, the Medical Library Association, as long as it's something that has to do with, health information is really the main point there. And so our office in SCR, we serve a 5-state region, which is Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and New Mexico. You can visit the NNLM.gov page to find your region, and you can follow us as well at NNLM SCR via Twitter or Facebook, and each region will have its own contacts as well. And oh my goodness, I am getting to the end of our time. So yes, someone says that they have a program planned to extract DNA from a strawberry with a group of 8 through 12 on Thursday. That is so awesome. I'm glad that you're already on it. So just lastly, this link is on the handout. I just wanted to say it doesn't end here. We're looking to the future. We're doing the Summer of Space, but just keep the momentum going. It was just announced that NASA's going to the moon again, but this time we're going to stay. And if you really want to get pumped for that, please go to that video that's linked to you on the handout. And it's just 2 minutes. It's a really short video. It's 2 minutes long, but it'll really get you pumped up for the moon and beyond. And so I apologize that I took longer than I thought, and I have run out of time for questions. However, if you do have questions, please feel free to send them to me at my email address here at debbie.montenegro@unthsc.edu. And of course, this class has been funded in whole or in part by the National Library of Medicine through a cooperative agreement with the UNT Health Science Center, and the content is solely my responsibility and does not necessarily represent the official views of the NIH. And so I just wanted to quickly go through here. Thank you so much for all of your comments, everyone. This has been so great. Someone just said space centers are fabulous. They went to Kennedy. I'm actually going to Kennedy in July to do a presentation, so that's exciting. So once again, I want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to go ahead and log off, but I will answer any questions you send via email. And just, if you can, please stick around for like 2 more minutes as Sarah does our wrap-up polls and evaluation. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today.